The summer heat in Tuscaloosa County, Alabama, was already suffocating by 8 in the morning on June 17, 1989, when 17-year-old Michelle Torres stepped out of her family's weathered mobile home on Creek Bend Road. The air hung thick with humidity and the promise of another scorching day that would send most folks indoors by noon. Michelle had been working the early shift at Donut Palace since graduating high school 3 weeks earlier, saving every dollar for her dream of attending Auburn University in the fall. Her younger sister Carmen watched from the kitchen window as Michelle climbed into her powder blue 1983 Honda Accord, the car she'd bought with money earned from 2 years of weekend shifts at the local grocery store. Michelle waved goodbye, her dark hair pulled back in the practical ponytail she always wore for work, her white uniform pressed and ready for another day of serving coffee and glazed donuts to the construction workers and farmers who started their days before sunrise. What happened during Michelle's 12-minute drive to work would haunt her family for 35 years and challenge everything investigators thought they knew about small-town crime in rural Alabama. The drive from Creek Bend Road to Donut Palace should have been routine. A straight shot down Highway 43 through farmland and scattered houses, past the old Baptist church where Michelle sang in the choir every Sunday, and into the heart of downtown where the donut shop sat on the corner of the Main Street and First Avenue. But Michelle Torres never made it to work that morning. At 10:15, when she failed to show up for her shift, her manager Janet Morrison called the Torres family home. Michelle's mother, Rosa, felt her stomach drop when she heard Janet's worried voice explaining that Michelle hadn't arrived and hadn't called. Rosa immediately drove Michelle's usual route, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she searched every driveway, every side road, every possible place her daughter might have stopped. At 11:30, Rosa found Michelle's Honda abandoned on a gravel pull-off near Miller's Creek, approximately 6 miles from their home and 4 miles from Donut Palace. The car sat empty, keys dangling from the ignition, driver's door hanging open like Michelle had stepped out intending to return in just a moment. Her purse remained on the passenger seat, containing her wallet with $47 in cash, her brand-new driver's license, and a small photograph of her boyfriend, David Hernandez, that she carried everywhere. The scene defied explanation in ways that would torment investigators for decades. Michelle's car showed no signs of mechanical trouble. The engine ran perfectly, the gas tank was nearly full, and all 4 tires were in excellent condition. There were no skid marks on the asphalt, no evidence of another vehicle forcing her to stop. No indication of any kind of accident or emergency. The driver's door was open, but everything else appeared undisturbed, as if Michelle had simply decided to step outside and then vanished into the Alabama morning. Sheriff Bobby Patterson arrived at the scene within minutes of Rosa's frantic phone call, his patrol car kicking up dust clouds as he pulled alongside Michelle's abandoned Honda. Patterson had been Tuscaloosa County's sheriff for 8 years, dealing primarily with domestic disputes, cattle theft, and the occasional moonshine bust. He'd never encountered anything like this. A responsible teenager disappearing without explanation from a car that showed no signs of trouble or violence. The initial investigation revealed Michelle Torres to be exactly what she appeared: a hard-working, ambitious young woman with no enemies and no reason to disappear voluntarily. She had been valedictorian of her graduating class, captain of the debate team, and had already received a partial scholarship to Auburn University. Her relationship with David Hernandez was stable and happy, according to friends and family. She had never missed work, never stayed out past curfew, and never given her parents any cause for concern. David provided investigators with a timeline that seemed to eliminate him as a suspect. He had worked the night shift at the paper mill and was asleep at his parents' house when Michelle disappeared, his alibi confirmed by multiple witnesses. Michelle's family could account for her activities the previous evening. She had eaten dinner at home, helped her younger sister with homework, and gone to bed early to prepare for her morning shift. The search for Michelle Torres began immediately and expanded rapidly. Volunteer fire departments from 3 counties converged on the area around Miller's Creek, joined by search and rescue teams from Birmingham and Montgomery. Bloodhounds tracked Michelle's scent from her abandoned car to the creek bank, where the trail ended abruptly at the water's edge. Divers searched the murky depths while ground teams combed through dense woods and abandoned buildings for miles in every direction. Local businesses closed early so owners could join the search effort. The Methodist church where Michelle's family worshipped became an unofficial command center, with Rosa Torres and other women from the congregation preparing meals for hundreds of volunteers. Pastor Williams organized prayer vigils every evening, his voice carrying across the sanctuary as he asked for Michelle's safe return and strength for her family during their darkest hour. As days stretched into weeks without any trace of Michelle, the investigation took on the desperate quality that characterizes cases where all logical explanations have been exhausted. Sheriff Patterson expanded his inquiries to include every registered sex offender within a 100-mile radius, every transient worker who had passed through the county during June 1989, and every person who had been questioned in connection with similar cases across the Southeast. The Alabama Bureau of Investigation assigned Detective Carl Mason to lead the case, bringing with him 15 years of experience in major crimes and missing persons investigations. Mason approached Michelle's disappearance with methodical precision, reconstructing her final days with forensic detail and interviewing everyone who had contact with her during the week before she vanished. The detective's investigation revealed no warning signs, no unusual behavior, and no indication that Michelle feared for her safety. Her diary, discovered in her bedroom, contained typical teenage concerns about college, her relationship with David, and her excitement about starting a new chapter of her life. The final entry, written on June 16th, simply read, "Can't wait for tomorrow. Only 3 months until Auburn. Everything is perfect." Mason's interviews with Michelle's co-workers at Donut Palace, her former teachers and her friends from school, produced a consistent portrait of a young woman who was well-liked, responsible, and focused on her future. Several people mentioned how excited Michelle had been about college, how she talked constantly about her plans to study business and eventually open her own restaurant. These were not the thoughts and dreams of someone planning to disappear. The physical evidence from Michelle's abandoned car was processed by the State Crime Laboratory, but 1989's forensic capabilities were limited compared to modern techniques. Fingerprint analysis revealed only prints belonging to Michelle and her family members. There were no signs of struggle inside the vehicle, no trace evidence that might indicate the presence of an unknown person, and no biological material that could be tested for DNA. As summer turned to fall and Michelle's scheduled start date at Auburn University passed without her, the case began its slow transformation from active investigation to cold case file. The massive search efforts were scaled back. The Volunteer Coordination Center at the Methodist Church was quietly disbanded, and the daily press conferences that had kept Michelle's disappearance in the local headlines became weekly, then monthly, then ceased altogether. Rosa Torres refused to accept that her daughter's case was unsolvable. She maintained a vigil that would last for 35 years, keeping Michelle's bedroom exactly as she had left it, continuing to set a place for her at the dinner table and calling Detective Mason's office every week to ask about new developments that rarely came. The Torres family's anguish deepened with each passing season, as Michelle's case joined the growing stack of unsolved files in Detective Mason's office. David Hernandez struggled to move forward with his life while carrying the weight of unanswered questions about the girl he had planned to marry after college. He found himself driving past Miller's Creek every few months, staring at the spot where Michelle's car had been found, searching for clues that had eluded professional investigators. Carmen Torres, who had been only 14 when her sister disappeared, grew up in the shadow of Michelle's absence. Every birthday, every graduation, every milestone was marked by the empty chair where Michelle should have been sitting. Carmen learned to navigate conversations about family carefully, watching people's expressions change when they realized she was the sister of that girl who vanished. The weight of being the surviving daughter shaped her teenage years in ways that would take decades to fully understand. By 1995, Detective Mason had been promoted and transferred to Montgomery, leaving Michelle's case in the hands of his successor, Detective Linda Reeves. Reeves inherited a file containing hundreds of interview transcripts, crime scene photographs, and evidence reports that told the story of a thorough investigation that had yielded no answers. She approached the case with fresh eyes, hoping that time and distance might reveal patterns that earlier investigators had missed. Reeves spent months re-examining every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and every lead that had been pursued during the initial investigation. She interviewed Michelle's family and friends again, looking for details that might have seemed insignificant in 1989 but could now provide crucial insights. The detective's methodical approach uncovered no new evidence, but it reinforced her conviction that Michelle Torres had not disappeared voluntarily. The emergence of DNA testing in the mid-1990s offered new hope for cold case investigations across the country. Detective Reeves arranged for biological evidence from Michelle's car to be submitted for genetic analysis, though the samples were limited and degraded after years in storage. The results were disappointing. While DNA profiles were successfully extracted, they belonged to Michelle and her family members, providing no new investigative leads. As the 20th anniversary of Michelle's disappearance approached in 2009, Rosa Torres had aged far beyond her years. The constant stress of not knowing her daughter's fate had taken a physical toll that was evident to everyone who knew her. She had developed a tremor in her hands that worsened whenever she spoke about Michelle, and her hair had gone completely gray by the time she turned 55. The case file had been transferred 3 more times as detectives retired or moved to other assignments. Each new investigator brought their own theories and approaches, but Michelle's disappearance remained as mysterious as it had been on that June morning in 1989. The physical evidence had been re-examined using increasingly sophisticated techniques, but technology could only analyze what existed, and Michelle's case seemed to exist in a void where crucial evidence had never been collected or had been lost to time. In 2010, Detective James Crawford became the 5th investigator assigned to Michelle's case. Crawford had specialized in cold case investigations during his 15-year career with the Birmingham Police Department, before transferring to Tuscaloosa County specifically to work on unsolved crimes. He understood that cold cases required different approaches than active investigations: patience instead of urgency, methodical analysis instead of rapid response. Crawford's review of Michelle's file revealed the same frustrating pattern that had stymied his predecessors. Every logical avenue of investigation had been pursued thoroughly. Every potential suspect had been eliminated through solid alibis or lack of connection to Michelle. Every piece of physical evidence had been analyzed using the best available technology. Yet Michelle Torres remained missing, and her family remained trapped in an endless cycle of hope and despair. The detective's breakthrough came not from new evidence, but from advances in genetic genealogy that revolutionized cold case investigations in the late 2010s. Companies specializing in forensic DNA analysis had developed techniques that could extract usable genetic profiles from increasingly small and degraded samples. More importantly, they could use these profiles to identify potential suspects through family connections in genealogical databases. In March 2024, Crawford received authorization to submit evidence from Michelle's case to Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based company that had gained national recognition for solving decades-old crimes using advanced DNA analysis and genealogical research. The evidence consisted of microscopic traces of biological material that had been collected from Michelle's car, but had been deemed too degraded for analysis using earlier technologies. The process required months of painstaking laboratory work as technicians attempted to extract DNA from samples that were 35 years old and had been stored under less than ideal conditions. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead analyst on Michelle's case, cautioned Crawford that success was not guaranteed. Many samples from the 1980s contained too little genetic material, or had been too severely degraded by time and environmental factors to yield useful results. The call that would change everything came on a humid Thursday morning in August 2024, almost exactly 35 years after Michelle's disappearance. Dr. Kim's voice contained barely contained excitement as she informed Crawford that they had successfully extracted a partial DNA profile from the evidence samples. More significantly, the profile clearly belonged to someone other than Michelle or her known associates, potentially her abductor. The genetic profile was immediately entered into genealogical databases, where sophisticated algorithms began searching for family connections among millions of users who had submitted DNA samples for ancestry research. The process that followed resembled detective work more than laboratory science, as genealogists constructed elaborate family trees and traced genetic relationships across multiple generations to identify potential suspects. Within 2 weeks, the genealogical analysis had produced a name that sent shockwaves through the investigation. The DNA evidence pointed to a man who had been questioned briefly in 1989, but quickly eliminated as a suspect due to his apparent lack of connection to Michelle Torres. Robert Wayne Mitchell had been 34 years old when Michelle disappeared, working as a long-haul truck driver who frequently traveled through Alabama on Interstate 20. Detective Crawford's hands trembled as he reviewed Mitchell's file, now thick with evidence that painted a disturbing picture of a predator who had hidden in plain sight for 35 years. Mitchell had died in 2019 from complications related to diabetes, taking his secrets to the grave just 5 years before science could expose his crimes. His death meant there would be no trial, no opportunity for Rosa Torres to confront the man who had destroyed her family. No chance for justice in the traditional sense. Yet the DNA evidence provided something equally precious: the truth that Rosa had sought for more than 3 decades. On September 15, 2024, Detective Crawford sat in the Torres family's living room, the same room where Michelle's high school graduation photo still dominated the mantelpiece, and delivered the news that would finally allow them to begin healing. Robert Wayne Mitchell had taken Michelle's life, but he could no longer steal their peace of mind. The case that had consumed 5 detectives and shattered a family's faith in justice was finally closed, not through traditional police work, but through the power of science to speak for victims who could no longer speak for themselves. Michelle Torres would never see her 36th birthday or fulfill her dreams of opening that restaurant, but her story had become a testament to the relentless march of forensic technology and a mother's unbreakable love.